In just a moment, Kate is going to hit record. We are going to record this so that way we can put it up on the YouTube page for folks who maybe weren't able to join today. So I think, Kate, we're ready to get going. All right. Welcome everybody to the Florida Society for Ethical Ecotourism educational webinar series. This is the third installment that we're doing this year in 2024. So if you haven't seen the first two, they are available on the Florida Sea Grant YouTube page. You can check those out. And today I'm going to be talking about plastic pollution, kind of some general education information, and then also incorporating education and best practices into programming. And so this is a joint effort between University of Florida Extension and Sea Grant, as well as Florida Sea. So Florida Sea, for those of you who don't know, is the Florida Society for Ethical Ecotourism. And it was established in 1998 to establish and maintain a professional code of ecotourism ethics in order to encourage an awareness and stewardship of Florida's natural heritage. And so this is something that ecotourism operators can go through the process to get certified. They have to meet certain requirements. I'll actually reference a couple of them today, but they have to meet certain requirements so that we know that they are being good stewards of the environment in the way that they run their operations. And so this can be beneficial for the ecotourism operators because then, they're able to advertise to folks that they are eco-friendly. That, can be a good selling point for a lot of folks these days in terms of how they want to spend their time and their money. And also it's great for us if you're traveling somewhere around Florida and you want to go out and experience nature, you want to make sure that you're going out with folks that are doing it in a sustainable, good way, then you can definitely check out the Florida Sea website to see what operators are going to be in that area. And also, if anybody is out there who's listening who is not currently a member and is interested in getting your organization certified, definitely check out the website, but also you can join as like a supporting member, more of like a sponsor of the organization if it's something that you value as something that's important. So I also, as part of that, we do education opportunities, which is what this webinar series is part of. So we did also invite, folks outside of the current organization because we're trying to help spread the word and also share some of this information. On the Florida Seaboard, we do have 3 Florida Sea Grant folks. So that is Kate, Mike, and myself. So Kate is also on here with me today, and she and Mike are down in the southwest part of Florida, and I am based in Flagler and Volusia counties. And we all are Florida Sea Grant Extension agents. And so we work with the University of Florida IFAS Extension with the Sea Grant program, doing marine science and coastal community education. These are some of the pictures from programs I've done, teaching other programs like the Florida Master Naturalist class, working with adults as well as youth with the 4-H programs, doing some marine science summer camps. So we are community resources of information, and also happy to be, partnering with organizations such as Florida Sea. And as with the University of Florida Extension, we make sure that all of our programs are accessible to all. And if anybody has any questions or concerns about that, please reach out to Kate or myself. So today I'm going to be chatting about plastic pollution. We're first going to talk about the different types of plastics and just get a little information education about that. And then I have a little experiment we're going to do virtually. And then we'll talk more just about marine debris issue as a whole, and what are some things that we can do. So first of all, I don't know if we think about this, but if you guys didn't know, plastic actually came from oil. So naphtha is one of the products that comes out of oil. And so that is, it's oil that's gone through other processes. This naphtha is what gets turned into different plastics. There's different types of polymers and other things that are added to it. And the first plastic was made, it was called Bakelite, and it was in 1906. And then ever since then, plastics have increased, been on the rise. And you can see that, just the dramatic increase in the amount of millions of tons of plastics that have been being produced every year. And this is an outdated graph. So actually currently it's over 400 let me minimize this here, over 400 million metric tons per year. So there's a lot of plastic out in the world now, unfortunately, and you know, something that we're definitely seeing in the environment now, and also, you know, trying to figure out how to deal with. So actually, I have a question for you all before we get into our next thing. What does this symbol mean? So feel free to just type something in the chat if you think you have an idea what that symbol means. All right, I see somebody wrote recycle. PET. Oh man, you're getting fancy with me. PET. Angela knows. Recycle. Any other things besides recycling, or is that pretty much what we think of it as? The type of plastic. Yeah. So we see these numbers, and we've come to, you know, accustom that symbol with meaning recycling. But what it is it's telling us about what type of plastic it is right there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever you see in there, if it's necessarily going to be recycled or recycled in your area. So if we were looking just at these numbers, though, does anybody know how many different types of plastics there are? You can throw it in the chat again as well. I see one guess of 5, 7, I guesses. So, anybody else? In terms of, it's kind of a trick question. There's 2 parts to this. In terms of the numbers that you see on the bottom, it goes up to 7. But really, there are, I actually don't know how many types of plastics there are. There are so many different types of plastics. In terms of this, though, we're gonna stick with 7. So, oops, this picture wasn't supposed to show up quite yet. Each number that you see is for a different polymer. And so, you know, the plastics are comprised of there's a bunch of little monomers that all get put together to become a polymer. So you see type 1 is polyethylene terephthalate. So poly meaning many monomers of ethylene put together. And you notice almost all of these have poly to start, right? It's different polymers. So type 1, PET, somebody got that on there for me already. Polyethylene terephthalate. This is drink bottles. So any water bottle or, you know, Gatorade bottle or anything like that. Also some of the other types of bottles that you might get cooking supplies in. Type 2 is high density polyethylene, and that is what makes up your milk bottles, also shampoo bottles, detergent. So it could be colored or it could be clear, but it's, you know, oftentimes making up some containers that are a little bit thicker and heftier. Type 3, PVC, you guys have probably heard of that one by what the initials are, polyvinyl chloride. So you guys know we've got PVC pipes used in a lot of our, you know, piping in houses and throughout other, I was gonna say a lot of my science equipment that I use. LDPE is our low density polyethylene, and that makes up plastic bags. So not necessarily all types of plastic bags. If you have your grocery bags, those are usually, actually I think type 5, but this one is interesting. It actually had the symbol really big right on it right here. Told me what kind it was. And a lot of the wrapping types of bags that you get. Type 5, polypropylene. So that is going to make up this yogurt container right here. A lot of the things that you get at the grocery store that end up in your fridge are probably made out of polypropylene. And then we have polystyrene. So polystyrene can actually be 2 different types of things. You can have regular polystyrene, and that's going to be like your solo cups. Also a lot of packaging containers. So if you get, you know, food for takeaway, a lot of times it is made out of polystyrene. And then you also have expanded polystyrene, which we also call styrofoam. So anything that you have that is styrofoam has those air bubbles in it, expanded polystyrene. And then type 7 is just other. So that's what we were saying. You know, there are more than 7 types of plastics, but type 7 is anything that did not fit into those other categories. There's a lot of the plastics that make up things related to, you know, like a baby bottle, the large gallon jugs of water that you have, or even just a little zip tie. So we have a little experiment I'm going to do with you all. So I'm going to stop sharing because I want you guys to be able to see me a little bit bigger. So I don't know how you guys have your screen set up, but if you want to, let's see, make it so that you see me a little bit bigger. So I'm taking up your full screen. It'll probably be easier to go here. The other thing I'm going to get you guys to participate in this. So I want everybody to go ahead and look at the bottom of the bar of your Zoom page, and you'll see a little, mine has a little heart shape, depending on your version of Zoom might be different. It says the word react. So if you click on the word react, you then see some different reactions you can have. And we're going to do a thumbs up sometimes. You're going to do that because we're going to vote on whether things can float. And if they float, you're going to give me a thumbs up. And then the thumbs down is too tricky to get to. So we're going to be creative. And if you think the thing is going to sink, you see right next to that, it's the little joy symbol. It's the little guy that looks like he's so happy he's crying. But I'm going to say that those little tears look like they're sinking down. So that's going to be our sinking for today. All right. So I want you guys to help me with my hypotheses. And we are going to talk about the different types of plastic. So in general, if I were to ask you guys, does plastic float or sink? What would you say? We're not all in person right now. I usually do a lot more chatting. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I'm getting some thumbs up. I'm getting some crying. And I think probably if some of you guys, if we're all talking, some people would also probably tell me it depends. And so that is part of it, right? So not all plastics behave the same. They're different polymers, right? So we are going to test some types of plastic. And I have little pieces. This is why you can see, here's my type 1. So I've got little pieces of these plastic. So I know obviously if we were to take, a whole like water bottle and it had a cap and it was full of air, that would float at the surface, right? Or if you filled this water bottle full of water, it would definitely sink to the bottom. But we're thinking about little pieces of those plastics. So, if these plastics got in the environment and they were breaking into smaller pieces, how would they behave in the ecosystem? So type 1, I've got this piece of plastic right here. This is PET, type 1 plastic. This came out of a water bottle. What do you guys think? Give me your little thumbs up if you think this piece of plastic is going to float, or a crying, smiling, laughing face if you think it's going to sink. All right, I see a lot of thumbs up. I see one down, and there we go. I was going to say somebody was just giving me a heart. They just liked it. That's okay too. All right, so here we go. Hopefully you guys can see. So the main thing is I have to put it, the other ones that have color will be easier to see, to put it all the way down, because otherwise if I put it at the very surface, it won't break the surface tension and everything will just float. So it's right here in the middle. Ooh, could you guys see it? What did it do? It sank. So we didn't get that one right. Okay, a few people got it right. But yeah, so actually the type of plastic that makes up water bottles, obviously, again, if you have it full of air, it's going to float. But this plastic itself actually sinks in the ecosystem, in the environment. All right, type 2. Type 2 is high density polyethylene. This is what makes up a milk jug. So what do you guys think? You guys think this piece of plastic, high density polyethylene, do we think it's going to float, or do you think it's going to sink? Let's see. I see more. Oh yeah, if you want to find the thumbs down, you can find it too. You just got to scroll a little bit more. I see Angela got it. All right, I see more sinking. All right, I've got it. Here we go in the middle. Oh man, we are not off to the best start today. It's okay, doesn't matter though, right? So this one actually floated. So yeah, our high density polyethylene types of plastic is floating. All right, type 3. Type 3, I have a little sliver of a PVC pipe. What do you guys think? PVC pipe, do you think it's going to float or sink? Any thoughts? I see some sinking. I see a couple float. I see mostly sinking. All right, PVC pipe in. Oh yeah, that sunk. Pretty heavy, relatively speaking, right? So as we're talking about these different types of plastics, we're talking about the density, right? So the plastics that have a higher density are ones that are going to be floating up to the surface, and other plastics have a what I might have just said it backward. If you have a lower density, you're going to be floating up. And if you have a higher density, you're going to be sinking down, right? So that PVC has a very high density. All right, type 4, this is our low density polyethylene. This is what makes up plastic bags. The piece I have is actually from the top of an oatmeal lid, also makes up that type. So what do we think? Float, sink? See, oh, I see a mixed bag. I see more floats than sinks. A little bit of a mix. Here we go. Woo! All right, we got that one too. All right, that one floated as well. All right, moving on. Polypropylene. This is yogurt and cottage cheese containers. Polypropylene. Type 5. What do we think? Float or sink? All right, I'm getting a lot of floating. Ooh, it's kind of a mix though. I think we've got more floating, but this is a pretty split decision here. Whoop, and it did. We've got another floating plastic. All right, we're just gonna do 2 more here. Polystyrene, but first I'm starting out with my piece of just regular polystyrene. So this came out of a Solo cup, or also again, like a lot of those takeout containers. So this plastic here, what do we think? Float or sink? Ooh, again, a pretty big mix. I see a few more sinks than floats, but we're pretty much even and even. All right, here we go. Sink. All right, so polystyrene sunk down. And our last one that we have that I'm going to test is expanded polystyrene. So also known as styrofoam. What do we think? Good, you guys are unanimous on this one. I think you have an idea. I'm going to try to do it. This one's kind of crazy when I put it in here. Oh, it won't even, hold on. It shoots up, yes. It is very low density because it has a lot of air bubbles in it, right? So it is going to pop all the way up. So, and it might be kind of hard for you guys to see, but I ended up with 3 types of plastic that sunk to the bottom and 4 types that are floating. So the answer to the question of does plastic float or sink is it depends, right? It depends on the type of plastic. Now this is fresh water. If we were to be testing this in salt water, you might think there might be some differences because salt water is denser than fresh water, right? In the case of this, I think with the densities that we have here, we would still end up seeing the same results, but it's definitely something interesting to keep in mind since freshwater and saltwater do have different densities. All right, so let me pull up my presentation again. Good job, you guys did a good job on that. We started off a little rough with like the first 2, but then you guys did very well thereafter. But I've never done this with the group that everyone has, like the majority has gotten all of them right. It never happens. So the results of our study, again, here we have, I didn't have us do our 7, but I had a little piece of zip tie. I'll give you the short end that the zip tie piece would have sunk. But again, type 7 is other, so it can include all different types of plastics. So depending on what type of item you look at, they may or may not sink. So when we look at these, you can see that plastics have a variety of different densities, and depending on what the different type of plastic is, it's going to behave differently in water, or in this case, in this image, behave differently in the ocean. So if these pieces of plastic end up getting in the ocean, how they behave in the water might be a little bit different. And I want us to think about, how do you think that affects the types of plastics that we end up finding on the beach if we do a beach cleanup and in the ocean? So I want you guys, I have a little poll I'm going to put up here. I want you guys to tell me, let's see, what do you think the top identifiable items, so something that we can still identify to what it is, found in beach cleanups worldwide? So the data that I'm using for this is from the International Coastal Cleanup. I don't know if any of you guys ever participated in the International Coastal Cleanup, but it's something that happens in September every year. And so There are folks doing beach cleanups around the world, and they're also collecting data on what they pick up as they do it. So that's how we have these data. So top identifiable item from beach cleanups around the world. Right. Did everybody have a chance to answer who wanted to? Ooh, you guys did pretty good on this. Let's see, I think I can share these results with you guys. So these are the results of what you all thought. So most people thought cigarette butts, and then after that, it was a pretty close tie. Plastic bottle. Oh, that's supposed to say caps, not camps. You guys figure that out. Plastic bags, straws, and then plastic bottles. So you guys were majority was right here. It is cigarette butts. So worldwide, the #1 item picked up on beaches during beach cleanups is cigarette butts. And I think, people look at those and they think, oh, it's paper, right? Or it's leaves, but they actually have a type of plastic filter. It's a bioacetate filter that is inside of it. And so that takes a very long time to break down, and it doesn't break down entirely into natural materials. So it's not something good to have out in the environment. I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer that if I were to ask you specifically for Florida, what is the #1 item picked up during beach cleanups? Again, it's going to be cigarette butts. But I want you guys to now tell me, what do you think the #2 item in, let me get my other poll up here. #2, so #1 is still cigarette butts. #2 item, what do you think most found in beach cleanups in Florida? Is it plastic bottles, plastic bottle caps, plastic bags, or straws? Yeah, and oh, sorry, I just saw this late, but this is, number of instances. Individual items that were picked up. Right. Let me share this here. All right, so we had a tie here between plastic bottle caps and straws. I'm going to go ahead and tell you also, all of these items are in the very top number. So they unfortunately all are things that were found pretty commonly. But the second most common in Florida is bottle caps. So yeah, I don't know if you guys maybe thought that because of personal experience of walking on the beach and finding a lot of bottle caps. But if we look back at bottle caps in terms of what they're made out of, most bottle caps are made out of polypropylene. That being said, actually, we started looking underneath bottle caps. They don't all have the symbol of what they are, but some of them do. And most of them are polypropylene, but also we've started seeing more that are the high density polyethylene as well. But if you remember, both of these types of plastics, 2 and 5, are both plastics that float. Versus our water bottle is type 1, is a type of plastic that sinks. But this is also a lot, flimsier. They need a cap to be something pretty sturdy that, as you screwing it on and off, it's not just gonna crunch in on itself. So if over time these items become separated, and what's gonna happen to this type of plastic? It's gonna end up sinking, and it's gonna, end up being something that we don't necessarily find later on. Versus a piece of plastic that's a little bit thicker and might take a little bit longer to break down, but is also something that floats. It's going to be able to float in the water for quite a while. We have a lot of currents around the entire world, but looking here throughout the Caribbean and around Florida, we've got water moving around. So if this is plastic that could be floating for a while, I love this image. This is showing us the Gulf Stream and the Florida current. So where you see the red and then especially the black, that is fast moving water. So you can see we've got the little Florida loop that comes up sort of in the Gulf, and that comes around really close near South Florida before going offshore. And so if there's things floating in the water, they can end up moving through these currents. If you go down into South Florida, you end up finding a ton of bottle caps. They also get more of the sargassum seaweed and a lot of other things that wash up because the Gulf current is so close to shore right there. Up where I live, closer to, Volusia, Flagler, we've got the Gulf Stream is a little further offshore, so we don't get as much washing up. But when we have big storms that come, a hurricane or just other, you know, big wave events, then we end up having some of that stuff wash in, and we'll see more of it. So it's just something to keep in mind if any of you guys, you know, are doing beach cleanups on your own with organizations that you're part of, with the companies that you work for. Just kind of like, you know, some interesting things to keep in mind, to be able to share with folks, to just be thinking critically in terms of what types of plastics are you seeing on your beach? Are they things that are coming from local sources? Cigarette butts. Those are probably coming from a local source, right? Those are coming from people right on those beaches. You know, if you found takeout containers and things like that. But if you find things like bottle caps, it can also lead to some, you know, interesting thinking about the oceanography and what's going on in the bigger picture around you. So I asked you guys what were the most common identifiable types of plastics, right? But if I were to ask you what was the most common type of thing picked up in general, it would actually be this tiny trash. So tiny trash, they categorize from the International Coastal Cleanup as any piece of plastic less than an inch. And so these are pieces of plastics that have broken down, and we can't necessarily tell what they were from anymore. But these pieces of, you know, plastics, as plastics out in the environment, the UV is going to break down the plastic over time, and they can get quite fragile and break into smaller pieces, but these are still going to persist in the environment for a very long time. There we go, a bunch of little microplastics. When we look, have you guys heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? That's something that gets talked about quite a lot. So interestingly, there isn't just the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. There's actually these garbage patches in each of the oceans. We have gyres in each of the oceans where the currents form sort of like a swirl, and that ends up bringing things that are floating, such as the plastics, all, you know, into certain areas. And within looking at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, we have the mass, so the overall like physical space that's taken up by plastics, and the weight of it is mostly from bigger types of plastics. And some of that does come, a lot of that comes from like commercial scale fishing gear. But if we look at the number of items, 94% of the items that are found are from microplastics, less than 5 millimeters. And so a lot of these plastics that are out here, these bigger plastics, over time, they do break down into smaller pieces, but they're still going to stay out there in the environment. And what are some reasons, you guys can throw it in the chat if you can think of any, what are some reasons, like why are we concerned about plastics in the ocean? What are the issues that they can cause when there's plastics in our ocean? So it gives me a second to drink my water. Animals eat it. That's definitely one of the biggest issues. You may think of anything else. It can be toxic to a lot of life when they're consumed. And then they can pass through the food chain to us or to other organisms in the environment. And fish and sea life get caught in them, right? Yeah, so one of the things is entanglement. You know, especially with different types of fishing gear, but it could also be other types of plastics that are out there that, you know, since it can be very difficult for some of the stuff to break down, that sea life can get caught in it. And then the other is ingestion of animals eating it. So we can see here on the top right, that is a very young loggerhead sea turtle that unfortunately passed away and was found with over 100 pieces of plastic inside of it. You can see that most of them are quite small. So if it gets plastics inside of it, that can, you know, end up causing blockages, and they aren't necessarily able to pass it. And so then they might end up being really full and not wanting to eat other food, or not able to actually eat other food, and they're not able to get the nutrition that they need. And so they can actually end up dying of starvation, even though they have the plastics inside of them. Other times it could also lead to blockages that could potentially cause with sea turtles like issues in their buoyancy, or even, you know, in some cases, damaging internal organs. Also, they've found with whales on the bottom left image, the little krill are eating the microplastics, and then the whales are eating the krill. And in that case, you know, it's not killing them directly. They're still able to, you know, eat those krill, but that's one of the things that we still don't really understand. It's a relatively new thing that we're discovering. And so they're looking to see how is this going to impact the whales in terms of their nutrition level that they're still able to get, or in terms of other things that might, you know, end up being passed up to them through the fact that there's an absorption of other chemicals, including other heavy metals or organic pollutants that can attach to plastics. Those things tend to attach to plastics more. And so if you end up consuming more plastics, then you might be consuming more of these toxins that are in the environment. And again, a lot of this stuff is relatively new that we're still, you know, studying and learning and trying to fully understand. But as we can see, there are a lot of negative impacts that we know of already, and other things that we think probably have negative impacts. We just don't fully understand the ramifications of all of it yet. And I just want to, you know, we see this image a lot. I know this was something I learned about as a kid, of learning, you know, the plastic bags. That's what sea turtles see, and it looks like a jellyfish, and that might be the case. But also, we wanted to give the sea turtles a little more credit. They might not necessarily just be thinking that. And also because unfortunately they eat a lot of plastic that doesn't look like a jellyfish, right? You saw those little pieces. But if you guys think about anything you put in the ocean, if you leave it there for like a week, what happens to it? It gets covered in algae or other things that start growing on it, right? So scientists are now thinking that more likely it's actually the smell of algae or other microorganisms, other little invertebrates. We call it biofouling. Anytime, you know, if you look at the edges of docks, they're covered in things. You leave a boat in the water for a week, it becomes all slimy with algae. Anything you leave in the water, other things are going to grow on it. And so it's more likely those olfactory cues that they're thinking that that's food, and that's why they end up eating these items, because they do actually have some food on them. It's just that the center part is not something that they should be eating. So, you know, now let's think, what are some things that we can do? What are some things that can be done? And if we look again over at this list on the left-hand side of the top 10 items that were collected during the beach cleanups, we can see that a lot of these items, you know, some of them are things that maybe we need to be using in our life, but a lot of them we don't necessarily need to be using, or at least we don't need to be using in a single use method, right? There might be ways that we can be rethinking how we're doing some things in our lives, trying to reduce the use of some of these items on the left-hand side. Or if we do end up needing to utilize them, making sure that we are recycling or disposing of them properly. And this is a piece of artwork by an artist named Ben Von Wong. You can see that the tap of all the plastics coming out. He has a series of these all, if anybody's interested, if you search his name, different places around the world. But, you know, I think it's just important to point out that a complicated issue requires a multi-pronged solution. And I understand that plastics, it's a very complicated issue, and plastics are, you know, ubiquitous in our lives these days. And by no means think that we should individually be responsible for, you know, all of our plastic use, but there are definitely things that we can do individually, as well as things that we can think about as a society or in our, you know, lives as educators or ecotour operators, or just how we deal with other people. So first, you know, are our personal choices that we can make in terms of purchasing and also responsible disposal. So choosing reusable items whenever we have the opportunity, and getting into the habit of remembering to use them, because I think I've heard from lots of people they have recyclable bags and they don't always end up in their car or in the grocery store with them. So I know that's just a habit, and it's just something we have to, you know, give ourselves grace with, but just try to get into the habit. My current one that I've gotten into a good habit about is I have my little collapsible Tupperwares, and I take them with me when I go out to eat. So if I need to take some leftovers home with me, I have my container with me. And every time I, you know, bust it out whenever the server asks me if I need a takeaway container, and I say, no, I have mine. And they always go, oh, that's so cool. I love that idea. You know, so sometimes you can always just inspire other people with ideas of things that you're doing in your life, and try to help spread awareness that way. And that can be a very, you know, like positive, non-pushy way of doing it. Trying to refuse single-use items as much as you can. Again, part of that is being prepared with your own. Also, understanding your local recycling regulations. So if you guys look at these numbers 1 through 7, how many of you guys know which plastics you can recycle in your recycling bin where you live? Any? Yeah, do we know? Because I used to live somewhere where I could recycle 1 through 5, and I moved, and now I'm 1 to 2. But I had to figure that out. And even when you see that, a lot of times, even if it says 1 to 5, I guarantee you can't put 3 and 4 in there. You definitely don't want to put your plastic bags in there. You might know that you can recycle these locally at I know like Publix and many other grocery stores. You can take the bags, but you don't want to put those in your recycling bins. Also with some of our other choices about getting clothing that is made of natural materials or secondhand, just trying to avoid fast fashion, because that's a whole other presentation we could do about how much waste we have now in our landfills from clothing. And then supporting responsible organizations. One of the examples being, some Ecotour operators that are making sure that they make the good decisions in their operations. I just wanted to show, this is from another activity that I have. I'll share with you guys the information about this at the end, but this was a sorting activity. So we have a bag of items, and you can just kind of see here the ways we can, the types of items we might interact with on a day-to-day basis. And looking on the left-hand side of our little Venn diagram here of single-use items versus on the right-hand side, looking at items that are more long-term use. And thinking about, which of these items on the left-hand side can we try to avoid in our day-to-day life, and try to, get in the habit of using more of those items on the right-hand side. And this is an activity that I've done with kids and with adults. And doing this sort of sorting helps us kind of like think about the types of items that we use and the impacts that they could have on the environment and how long we're able to use them for. So this is from the Florida Society for Ethical Ecotourism, their certification criteria. So for organizations to become certified as a sustainable organization with Florida Sea, they have to have, there's quite a few criteria they have to meet. And so one of the sections is on environmental sustainability and minimizing their waste. So you can see quite a few things listed here, many of these which are definitely beneficial for whether you are an ecotourism operator or just also in our day-to-day lives, of trying to purchase materials that minimize packaging. So trying not to purchase a bunch of single-use things, but something larger that maybe you don't have quite as much plastic and packaging for. Avoiding disposable items, avoiding styrofoam, because that one is very hard to recycle and reuse. Again, avoiding small portion packaging, recycling when you have items that you have to use, as well as other things that we can do, such as trying to compost our kitchen waste, and purchasing recycled or reused plastics as much as possible. So I just thought this was very cool that this is something that is incorporated as one of many aspects into the certification process here. And another thing is just like serving as an example, again, whether this is as an ecotourism operator or in your day-to-day life surrounded, your friends, your families, your coworkers, serving as an example and making it as easy as possible for participants or other people in your life to be good stewards. Because a lot of times people aren't being bad stewards on purpose, but mostly now I think it comes down to convenience and accessibility. So, if you are, this is just an example, if you have a tour that you're doing, and when people are registering or you're providing information, reaching out and encouraging people to bring a reusable water bottle and letting them know that you will have water available to refill a reusable water bottle with. So hopefully people then are able to, take that initiative on their own, and also they know that they'll have water that they can refill, so they don't feel like they need to bring extra water bottles. And then you might still want to have water available for them due to, safety and hydration. And it might be plastic water bottles if that's what makes sense, but also they now are organizations that have, or companies that are making canned water. Aluminum is much more recycled than plastic and can be recycled indefinitely, as opposed to plastic, which has a much shorter, return on how often it can be recycled. And then making sure that you do have recycling, you can collect that so that it doesn't end up in a trash bin if there are plastic water bottles or cans of things that have to be recycled. So it's just kind of like having those steps in there. And I know when I've offered programs in my office, I'm not going to say it's happened every time, but, and try to put in the effort to have either items that are biodegradable, or providing actual silverware and providing mugs as opposed to single use. And it takes a little bit more time on my end and a little bit more cleanup at the end of making sure that all those things can go into the dishwasher and be cleaned and put away. But I had a lot of comments from people who took that program saying that they appreciated that while I was teaching about environmental stewardship, that they saw that I was making the effort to do that. And so I think, you know, while you're teaching about certain things, if you can model those behaviors, it can go a long way. I don't know if anybody here has paddled at Weeki Wachee in Florida. This is off of their website. And I know them, and I know that there is one other springs in Ocala National Forest that they actually have a non-disposable items policy, and that they do not allow disposable containers of any kind. So everything has to, you're not allowed to bring a plastic water bottle. You have to have a reusable one. And if you have other, you know, even chips, you have to put them in a Tupperware or something, because they want to make sure that none of that trash accidentally ends up in their, you know, in their spring, in their state park. So it is cool to see. This was actually I could only find 2. So if anybody's seen this on any others, I'd be curious to hear. But, you know, as things like this become more widespread, then it also forces people to think about it more and makes people have to accept some of these practices. So yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, back to some other solutions. One of the big things, which again, we can't fully tackle in today, but systemic changes in production and recycling. You know, it shouldn't all be on us as, you know, people, you know, choosing to try to avoid single-use plastics. Part of it is trying to change the system. And I did want to give one example of something that worked, which is really awesome. There used to be microbeads, little microbeads of plastic that were in our toothpaste and in our face washes. And that came in, you know, it was making its way into the waterways. And people, when people found out, they're like, you know, why? There's no reason for this. And it's having a negative impact on our environment. And because of public outcry and because of pressure and pressure to lawmakers, they actually did change the law in the Microbead Free Waters Act of 2015, which became effective in 2018. It banned plastic microbeads in cosmetic products. So that was something that is no longer allowed to happen. So just an example of when there is attention brought to certain issues, that there are legislative changes that can be made. Another thing is intercepting waste before it reaches the ocean. Most of the waste that reaches the ocean actually does flow out of rivers. And so if we can stop it before it actually goes out, that's going to be huge. This is of an image of a creek actually in Holly Hill in Volusia County, not too far from where I live. And this is something called a water goat. So you think of goats that eat everything. So it's like a boom system that is capturing all of the floating plastics. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that I read from this group, they mostly find food containers, like styrofoam food containers, and a lot of bottles that, you know, still have the cap on them. So they're going to be floating. And this is actually run by local, you know, citizens who clean this out every 2 weeks or so to dispose of it. And then over in the Gulf Coast in Pasco County, if anybody's over that way, I know there's a new program that is just getting started called Operation Trap. So they also have some of these boom catchment devices, and they've also been putting these storm drain traps that you see on the left-hand side in the storm drains, as well as making sure that there's the monofilament tubes, these PVC tubes that people can put their monofilament if they're fishing and they have fishing line that breaks or gets tangled. It can be disposed of properly there so it doesn't end up going in the environment, and can be recycled that way. So those are just 2 locations I know of that have these going on, and they do rely on you know, local residents helping clean out some of these things. So if you live in either the Holly Hill, Volusia area or over in Pasco and you're interested, those are definitely 2 I know you can get involved with, and I'm sure there's some more around the state. Another thing is doing beach cleanups. Obviously, anytime you want to do a cleanup when you're at the beach, anytime at the beach is a good time for a beach cleanup, or any outdoor area, right? Because anything that's on land is eventually going to wash into a water body, which will eventually make its way to the ocean. So even picking up, you know, trash on land, even if you're not close to the ocean, is still very important. The International Coastal Cleanup is coming up in just over a month now. So that is on September 21st this year. Can I see how many people have ever participated in the International Coastal Cleanup? Can you give me a real hand or a digital hand? I'm curious. See some folks. So the International Coastal Cleanup, awesome. I love seeing some folks up there. Kate's been putting the links for a couple of these things in the chat. And also we will send you guys an email, a follow-up email tomorrow probably, and we'll include any of the links that we're mentioning in this program today. We'll share with you guys again then. But the International Coastal Cleanup is organized by the Ocean Conservancy. As the name implies, it's something international that happens on the same day every year. And so in addition to removing all of that trash from the beach, we are also collecting the data. That's where I got those data points from that we used in our activity earlier. And so it provides information about what's going on in different places in the world and any trends that we see changing over time. So it's an important citizen science opportunity, as well as a, just removing trash. And if anybody on here is one of the Florida Sea certified members, supporting beach cleanups is one of the bonus certification activities. So like I said, the International Coastal Cleanup is September 21st this year. For any of you guys that live in Volusia County, the Volusia County Environmental Management organizes. I think Kate will throw some links in there, and again, we'll email these out. They have different sites. Anybody can go to the beach and do a cleanup on your own. You don't have to do it as part of an organized event, but there are some different groups locally that do it. And if you go out, sometimes it's more of a fun social activity. And they might also I know with Volusia County Environmental Management, they provide some of the gear, like the little pickup things, so you don't have to pick up everything with your hands. And they usually have really cool t-shirts. If you're up in Flagler or in St. Johns County, Friends of Scenic A1A have organized different sites. And you can also search on the International Coastal Cleanup. They have a map, so you can search wherever you are, whether it's in Florida or somewhere else in the US or the world, and find groups that are doing it near you. They do have an app now, so on your phone, you can download the Clean Swell app. That's what the little image looks like. And so it makes it really easy when we're out collecting the trash to be able to just tap on the little icon for like, I found a plastic water bottle, I found a cigarette butt, and that's how they get their data. So if you are ever working with, people in an education capacity, you can always utilize this app and still be contributing to the data, even not on this day. So you're able to set up a beach cleanup through this app and submit your data any day of the week. So that's another way that you can just add another layer to any sort of programming that you do, so that folks are contributing to the data and the knowledge base as well. And you can see, a lot of times groups like to go out, have a lot of fun. It's one of the locations from Flagler Beach the other year. And then the last thing I just want to mention is education. So I appreciate you guys all taking your time out this evening to come here and hopefully learn some things, and have it be something that you're able to then take and share with others, whether that is through working with visitors of Florida, of people who live here, with your grandchildren, with your coworkers, in whatever capacity it is. And I did also just want to mention the Florida Microplastic Awareness Project. That is another program that if you're interested, especially in learning more about microplastics, there is some good educational information if you search for that. If anybody's really interested, I can even get you set up with some equipment to do microplastic sampling. And did just want to mention, I think Kate already put it in there. Maybe put it in there again. I have written up a set of curricula for 3 different activities. One of them was the little float sink experiment that we did. Another one was thinking about the types of trash that we find on the beach. I have a series of cards that you can download and print out to have groups look at them and pick or put in an order of what they think the most common types of trash on the beach would be. And then the last one being that hula hoop Venn diagram activity, looking at single-use and multi-use items. So if any of these are things that you think you could incorporate, I love it because you can turn them into a whole lesson, but you can also take one of these activities and just spend 5 minutes doing it. So if any of those are of interest to you, you can download the curricula as well as the some of the pages that you need to print out for some of these activities. So with that, I'd like to say thank you guys for coming out this evening. I think Kate will throw this in the chat. We do have a favor to ask. There's a survey that she just put the link into there. If you guys don't mind filling out this survey, this really helps us in terms of our reporting and being able to, report the impacts of the programs and whether folks are, attending and learning things. It should only take a couple of minutes. So whether, right now or when we end, if you could do that, we definitely appreciate it. And I also wanted to mention that we'll have our next seminar will be coming up on, see here on September 11th. That is going to be Mike. He's going to be talking about horseshoe crabs, the biology, ecology of horseshoe crabs, and the horseshoe crab watch. And Kate also just put the link in there for registration to get the link to join us for next seminar. And then we also have on the schedule November 9th, Kate, who's been in here with me. She's going to be talking about understanding Florida's red tides. And then I will be back the following month in November to talk about corals. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take those. Or again, if you can fill out that survey, we would really appreciate it. Do you have any questions for me?
I thought I saw one hand go up. Was that an accident?
Well, thank you guys for the thank you comments in the chat. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I am happy. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, definitely happy to.
I see.
Oh, Mom, is that a question, Pam?
Yes, it is. It's more a comment. I'm Carolyn's mom, and I'm very excited to see what she's teaching us all. And we live in Richmond, Virginia, and I spend a lot of time on the James River. So you've helped me realize I don't have to wait till I go down to Virginia Beach at the ocean. I can be organizing things on the James River because everything here will end up down there. So that was really helpful to me. Thank you.
Yes, plus there is wildlife in the James River as well. So, there's unfortunate interactions that could happen in other environments as well. But yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Carolyn, Michelle asked, can we email you for microplastic monitoring kits?
If you send me an email, so we can chat about it more. I'm sure who that was. Yeah, that's kind of like a whole setup, but if anybody is interested in that, if you have a location that you would be doing that out, whether it's through, long-term with like an educational program or a site that you're interested in monitoring, I can talk you through the process of that and give more information. And then depending on where you are in the state, either you can come pick them up from me or we'll have to figure out getting the supplies to you. But yes, feel free to reach out. I think my email was on there, but for anybody in general, I'll put my email in the chat right now. Right there. If anybody wants to reach out at any point in the future, plastics or other things. If you guys are other places in Florida, definitely figure out who your local Sea Grant extension agent is. Again, Kate's over in Charlotte County. I'm in Flagler and Volusia. Not every county in Florida has a Sea Grant agent, but you should have one at least, within a county or two away. So we're always happy to be resources.
I also wanted to point out that Mike put a video link in the chat. Mike, I think we'll take a chance to review this and maybe follow up and send it out with our resources, Carolyn.
Sure.
If it fits the bill. I'm sure it does, Mike.
All right. Thank you guys for those of you who said you did the survey. Really much appreciate that. And yeah, and we'll follow up with the link to this. So if anybody wants to share it with anybody, you're welcome to, or also that way you'll have access to all of the links that we referenced during this. Okay. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining us this evening, and we'll hopefully see you next month for horseshoe crabs.